All right, this round is started the live stream. You can begin. Thank you.
All right, do I have counsel from both sides present and ready to proceed with trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Oh, did our other judge just show up? Hold on just a second, y'all. Andrew, it looks like you are here now.
Yeah, sorry, I had to take a restroom break, but I am here.
Okay, we just had another judge added here. Let me text Scott real fast and tell him.
Sorry, for some reason my audio changed sources. What did you say?
I just need to text because we just had another judge put in here because we weren't sure if you were coming. So I just want to text Scott and let him know.
Yeah, that's fine. I already texted Elliot, so
Okay.
he should know as well.
Okay. That's fine then. If he knows, then we should be ready to start. And I guess we can just give me 1 second, y'all.
Andrew, are you able to get on the ballot?
So other judges, are y'all all on your ballots? Are we in a good place to start?
I am not on the ballot.
Okay.
Andrew, if you can get on the ballot, I'll go ahead and I was instructed by Elliot to leave so that you could judge. But if you are not able to, then.
Yeah, it's no problem. I'm just pulling up the ballot right now. So opening up all my comment sheets and everything.
You good to go?
Yeah, we should be good to go whenever we get the go ahead at 10:30, I think.
Okay, cool. Then I will leave y'all to it.
And just to make sure we have everything in order, we have plaintiff as 1114 and defense as 1065.
That's what I have. I assume there are no objections to that from either counsel. Great.
All right. Did Elliot get you guys started?
We are streaming. He was here. We are streaming. Are we good to start now, or do we need to wait for anything else?
Let's see. I think as long as the presiding judge is the host and you guys are streaming.
Yep.
All right. Let me just get out of here. You guys are good to have at it. You guys got access to your ballots and everything?
Yeah, our competitors ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, defense is ready as well.
Alrighty. Then let's get started. Before we begin, just a few ground rules. The only people who should be on camera right now really is whoever's presenting and your presiding judge. You should stay on mute the whole time. And scoring judge, just, you probably already know this, but it helps to be on speaker view when the attorney is giving a statement, and gallery view when we are hearing directs and crosses. So thank you. Awesome. Looks like we are good to go. Do we have any preliminary matters to address before the court before we begin?
Plaintiff has some pretrial matters we'd like to discuss, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead.
All right. Should we begin with introductions first?
You should.
All right. Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Michaela Chase, and I, alongside my co-counsel, Thomas Azari.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And Maria Kudasheva.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Represent the plaintiff in today's case, the estate of Genesis Petrillo. Your Honor, before we proceed to opening statements, we have some pretrial matters we'd like to take care of.
All right.
Permission to invoke Rule 615, the constructive sequestration of all witnesses, barring party representatives.
Yeah, that's fine. I assume you don't have a party rep in this case.
No, we do not.
All right.
Your Honor, we'd also like to invoke Rule 603, the constructive swearing in of all witnesses.
They will be sworn in.
During statements, should we refer to you as both the judge and the jury?
I'm your judge, but for the purpose of this, I mean, you're talking to the same source, so do as you will with that.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Your Honor, should we ask for permission before screen sharing evidence?
No, just do it.
And Your Honor, due to the nature of this trial, we'd like to inquire about your preferences when someone comes across any technology or audiovisual issues. For instance, if their internet cuts out or if they have trouble hearing, how would you like for us to proceed?
If it is a substantial thing, like somebody is just like disconnected or somebody freezes for a long period of time, we can just pause time until we get it back together. If it's just like you couldn't hear a question, just ask again and say, hey, could you repeat the question?
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff is ready to proceed to opening statements.
All right, I will hear preliminary matters from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense would like to designate Harper Martini as the defendant and as party representative.
Sure.
In addition, Your Honor, we would like to make introductions.
Please do.
Your Honor, my name is Joshua Wagner, and along with my co-counsel, Victoria Hofflinger and Cameron Viss, we will be representing the defense on behalf of Peony Estates.
Sure. Anything else?
Your Honor.
All right, then. We will proceed into opening statements. Plaintiff, when you are ready.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff is ready. May we proceed?
You may.
Thank you. Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel, may it please the court. The defendant promised and the defendant delivered. It is June 8th, 2019, the wedding of Casey Soto and Genesis Petrillo. What was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives soon turned into the most tragic. Let's take a step back. Genesis Petrillo and Casey Soto decided to get married. You'll learn that the defendant, Harper Martini, who was the father of Casey Soto, absolutely hated Genesis Petrillo. After hearing that Casey and Genesis would be moving to a different country after the wedding, you will hear today that the defendant promised Ms. Petrillo that if she took Casey away from him, then he would make her disappear. The day before the wedding, on June 7th, the defendant hands Miss Petrillo a special bottle of Cara wine, but you will hear today that that bottle had pesticides in it, the same pesticides that the defendant had access to from his winery. You'll hear that after Genesis Petrillo drank the wine, the effects were immediate. After falling ill, Genesis Petrillo was taken to the hospital, but it was too late. Miss Petrillo fell into a coma and died from pesticide poisoning less than 6 hours after drinking that bottle of wine. Members of the jury, this is why we are suing the defendant, Harper Martini, for battery. As the plaintiff in this case, we bear the burden of proof. We have to prove that it was more likely than not that the defendant intentionally mixed pesticides into that bottle of Cara wine and that he gave to Miss Petrillo with the intent to cause harmful contact to her. Genesis Petrillo ingested the pesticides as the defendant intended, and because of that, Miss Petrillo passed away. We will meet this burden today, and we will do so by calling 3 witnesses. First, Angel Rodriguez will take the stand. You will learn that Miss Rodriguez was a close and personal friend to Genesis Petrillo and Casey Soto, and she will give you a detailed account of the events leading up to Miss Petrillo's untimely death. Next, Sam Arnold, a local business owner and a caterer for the wedding, will testify. Miss Arnold will tell you about the wedding and the inner workings of the defendant's winery, the Peony Estates, and how the defendant demonstrated his absolute resentment towards Genesis Petrillo. Next, you will hear from Dr. Jimin Kwan, an expert in the medical field of toxicology, who examined Miss Petrillo firsthand. Dr. Kwan will explain how Genesis Petrillo's death was directly caused by the pesticides present at the Peony Estates. At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Thomas Azari, will come before you to review the testimony given and the evidence presented. He will ask you to find the defendant, Harper Martini, liable for battery because the defendant promised and the defendant delivered. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense counsel, do you have an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. May it please the court. Your Honor, members of the jury, perceptions can be deceiving and often are. The truth is that the facts of today's case do not show any actions taken by Harper Martini done with the intent to cause harm. A plaintiff's counsel will spin you a story today. They will talk about everything that Harper Martini said, but not what Harper Martini did. His actions were never taken with any intent to harm anyone. You will see today that the real Harper Martini is a man who cares. The evidence of Harper's actions will corroborate this truth. He cared too much about the winery to take actions with regard to the usage of pesticides that would put it in danger of being shut down. And as you will hear, he intended to pass Peony Estates, his winery, on to his son Casey. His actions support this notion. The evidence will show that Harper Martini cared too much about his child to ever hurt someone that they loved. Now, to prevail on the claim of civil battery, the plaintiff today must fulfill their burden of proof by a preponderance of the evidence. This means that they must fulfill all elements to this claim pursuant to Burdett v. Copenhagen, including that my client Harper Martini took actions against Genesis Petrillo, that these actions were performed with the intent to cause harmful or offensive contact, and finally, that the intended harm or contact was in fact consummated. Now, to show the utter lack of evidence for these claims, we will be calling 3 witnesses in our case in chief. First, we will call Casey Soto to the stand. He is the son of Harper Martini and was the soon-to-be husband of Genesis Petrillo. He will explain the nature and reality of his father's relationship with Petrillo. Additionally, Soto knows the practices followed with respect to the proper storage of hazardous materials at Peony Estates. He will explain the precautionary practices exercised where the pesticides were stored, who had access to them, and cautions taken at Peony Estates to ensure the safety and quality of the products produced. Next, Harper Martini himself will testify. He will explain the exact nature of his relationship with Genesis and his true opinions on Casey and Genesis's relationship with each other. He will explain where and when pesticides were present at Peony Estates and the exact events as they occurred on June 7th, 2019. Through his testimony, Martini will show that he had no intent to cause Genesis physical harm and indeed took no actions to that end. Finally, members of the jury, if opposing counsel's claims are to be believed, if my client intended to consummate harmful conduct toward Genesis Petrillo by means of the Cara wine, important questions arise. Why, as the evidence will show, would he do so in front of the entirety of the wedding party? Ask yourselves that question as you listen to testimony today. Now, our last witness today will be Blaine Osborne. She was the planner for the wedding of Genesis Petrillo and Casey Soto. She will testify explaining her working relationship over the last years with Harper Martini and Peony Estates. She will also describe her perceptions of the cleanliness and safety precautions taken by Harper Martini. So as you listen to the evidence and testimony today, ask yourself if Harper Martini's actions really show an intent to cause harm, or if the plaintiff is just looking for someone to take the blame. At the end of today's trial, the plaintiff will have failed to meet their burden of proof, and we will ask that you find in favor of Harper Martini. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Plaintiff, are you ready to proceed with your case in chief and call your first witness?
Yes, we are, Your Honor. At this time, we would like to call Angel Rodriguez to the stand.
Certainly.
May we proceed?
You may.
Thank you. Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hi, my name is Angel Rodriguez.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a kindergarten teacher.
How do you know the parties involved in today's case?
I have known Genesis Petrillo and Casey Soto since 2016. We met through a mutual friend, Drew, and we were fast friends.
What was Mr. Petrillo and Miss Soto's relationship like?
They seemed like the type to be together forever. They really loved each other. In 2018, they announced that they were engaged, and we had to celebrate that.
And how did you celebrate?
We went to a winery, Rosie and Pedro. By the end of the night, it seemed like the entire wedding was planned. And later on, Casey's father, Harper Martini, took control over everything, and everything changed.
You said Mr. Petrillo and Miss Soto had a great relationship. How was Mr. Petrillo's relationship with the defendant?
Harper would criticize and insult the closest person to Casey. The two of them would argue constantly. It clearly put a strain on everybody involved.
Turning to the wedding, when were Mr. Petrillo and Miss Soto supposed to get married?
On June 8th, 2019. Originally, we were supposed to have the wedding at Rosie and Pedro, but Harper made them have the wedding at their own winery, Peony Estates. And the rehearsal dinner was the night before, June 7th.
How did the rehearsal dinner go?
The dinner itself started off poorly. Harper and Genesis were arguing, but it ended worse when Genesis died.
Arguing? Did you hear the defendant saying anything to Mr. Petrillo?
Yeah, I heard Harper tell Genesis, "I will make you disappear." I could not believe it.
How did Mr. Petrillo react to being told that they would be made to disappear?
Genesis told me that they were afraid Harper is going to kill them if they aren't too careful. It was clear that Genesis weren't kidding either. I was petrified for Genesis.
Did you see the defendant again later that evening?
Yes, I saw Harper walk into the kitchen holding a can that clearly said pesticide. I was so worried, so I asked Harper about it.
And what did the defendant say?
Harper said, "It is for Genesis because Genesis is such a pest." And I was floored.
After the defendant told you that the pesticides were for Mr. Petrillo, did you observe the defendant having any other interactions between the two?
To my complete surprise, Harper decided to make a toast for Genesis. They made a big deal of giving everyone at the party a bottle of wine from Peony Steaks. But Harper gave Genesis a special bottle. It was called Cara.
Did you see anyone drink the Cara wine?
Well, Genesis had multiple glasses of that wine, and they offered to everybody, and I had a little bit, and I spit it out right there. I didn't like the taste of it, and nobody else had any.
How did Genesis act after they drank the bottle?
Well, she was acting strange, so I asked her if she was all right. Genesis replied with, "This isn't the kind of feeling I've ever felt before," and actually ended up sleeping at the bar.
What did you do as a result?
I took Genesis to her room. By the time we got to the room, Genesis looked flushed. She was sweating, vomiting profusely. She couldn't keep any water down. Genesis said, "Call 911," right before she passed out. So I did.
After you called 911, what happened?
The paramedics arrived. I rode with them to the hospital. I spent the entire night to get in contact with Genesis' family, but nobody answered. Eventually, by 8 a.m., I got the word that Genesis slipped into a coma.
Did the doctor say anything to you about what had happened in specific?
The doctor said it was because of some sort of poisoning, and I went back to Puny Estates after that. Casey had to know.
What happened when you got back to Peony Estates?
I ran into Harper. Before I could say anything, he said, "Genesis got poisoned? Oh no, we'll have to cancel the wedding." I didn't even mention anything about poison or Genesis getting hurt. I was shocked.
After this, what did you do?
I went to find Casey. It was devastating. He was already dressed, ready for the wedding, looking great. It was heartbreaking when I told him about Genesis. By the time we got to the hospital, Genesis has already passed away.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I begin?
Yes, counsel, are you wanting to be on camera for your cross? Because I cannot see you.
Did that seem to fix the issue?
Yeah, I can see you now.
Okay, good.
Oh, I lost you again.
Can you see me at this time?
I can't. I can see you now.
Okay. All right. Hello, Ms. Rodriguez.
Hello.
You witnessed how much Harper cared about Casey, correct?
Yes.
And you said that they were madly in love?
With Casey?
Sorry. And Casey was heartbroken when Genesis died?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. Casey was heartbroken when Genesis died, correct?
Yes.
And during the night of the wedding, you saw Genesis drinking several glasses of wine, correct?
I saw Genesis had more or less one drink at that night before Cara wine.
Yes, and you actually took a sip of that Cara wine, the special wine that you referenced?
Yes, I didn't like it, so I spit it out right there before even swallowing it.
The wine was in your mouth, correct?
Yes, but I didn't swallow, I just spit it out.
Okay. And you also saw Genesis drinking champagne that night?
Yes, a little bit.
And then later you saw Genesis at the bar ordering tequila shots for everyone.
Oh, yes, Genesis ordered for everyone, for friends and everybody, but I didn't see Genesis drink anything.
But you were focused on a conversation with Drew Matsukas at the time, correct?
Yes,
And you had been drinking yourself.
yes, I was.
And after Genesis ordered those shots, you saw them slumped over the bar snoring, correct?
Yes, that was after Genesis had a couple wine glasses from the car of wine.
And that was after Genesis had drank the champagne and ordered the shots, correct?
Yes, also after the car of wine.
And so to summarize, you saw Genesis drinking wine and champagne, then ordering tequila shots, and then you found them vomiting and sweating in their hotel room, correct?
Well, I actually didn't see Genesis drink tequila shots, and I was kind of surprised that they were not drinking as much they usually do. And they were getting married tomorrow, so yeah.
Redirecting you to my question, you saw Genesis drinking wine and champagne, then ordering tequila shots, then you found them vomiting and sweating in their hotel room, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. May I proffer?
Yeah, what's your objection?
This is a compound question.
Response?
Your Honor, I'm simply summarizing what has been previously answered on cross-examination and then leading the witness to explain what they saw at the hotel room.
So I do agree that by putting stringing three different things together in a question, it is a compound question. I do think you already asked it though, and I think you got an answer. So I'm going to sustain that. Let's move on.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You found you found Genesis vomiting and sweating in their hotel room, correct?
Yes, when I was taking Genesis to her room.
And that was after the drinking, correct?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Any redirect for this witness?
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right. The next witness when you are ready, plaintiff.
Plaintiff calls Sam Arnold to the stand. May I proceed?
You may.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hey everyone, my name is Samantha Ann Arnold, but everybody just calls me Sam.
I'm sorry, ma'am, could you say that one more time? We couldn't hear you quite well.
Oh yeah, sure. My name is Samantha Ann Arnold, but everybody just calls me Sam.
What do you do for a living?
I run a humble little catering business called Carol's Cooking Cajun Cuisine, named after my lovely grandma Carol.
Can we pause time for just a
One
second?
second.
Yeah, let's pause because I can't entirely hear you. I'm not sure if it's like a mic thing.
It's a mic issue.
Yeah, so let's take 30 seconds or however long you need to get that fixed. And yeah, we'll just pause trial because I definitely would like to be able to hear your witness.
Am I better now?
Not really.
One second.
All right.
Sorry about that.
No worries. It happens.
Yeah, we're on Zoom. Things happen.
Hey, are you able to hear me now?
That's fine.
I can hear you. Great.
I'm so sorry about that.
Your Honor, should we just start from the top?
Yeah, can we just like take back the clock for a second and just let them start from
20 seconds should be fine.
Sure, great.
Okay. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hey everyone, my name is Samantha Ann Arnold, but everybody just calls me Sam.
What do you do for a living?
I run a humble little catering business called Carol's Kicking Cajun Cuisine, named after my lovely grandma Carol. We serve shrimp gumbo, shrimp and potatoes, pineapple shrimp, shrimp burgers, coconut shrimp, you name it, we make it.
How did you get into that line of work?
Well, I've been cooking since I could crawl. I remember growing up cooking in the kitchen with my mama and my grandmama. And in fact, on my grandmama's 98th birthday, she passed along her catering business to me. And the rest is just history.
How did you get involved with this case?
One of my longtime clients, Harper Martini's child, Casey, was getting married, and they asked me to cater for the ceremony and the wedding rehearsal. Unfortunately, I never got to actually cater for the ceremony since the bride had passed away.
How did the process for catering that wedding start?
It started in November of 2018. I had gone to the Peony Estates kitchen to make sure it was set up in the way I needed everything set up.
Did you see the defendant when you got to the kitchen?
I did. I saw Harper Martini carrying a pesticide sprayer bottle past a door marked employees only.
Do you know what was behind that door?
I do. I later learned that that was where the wine was bottled.
After you saw the defendant carry a bottle of pesticides into the area where wine is bottled, what did you do?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't quite hear you.
After you saw the defendant carry a bottle of pesticides into the area where wine is bottled, what did you do?
Well, I wanted to start talking to Harper about the menu, but Harper had other things she wanted to talk about.
What did you and the defendant talk about?
Harper talked almost exclusively about Casey's fiance, Genesis Petrillo.
What was the defendant saying about Genesis Petrillo?
She was calling Genesis selfish and immature and just wouldn't stop complaining the whole time. Towards the end of our conversation, she was getting visibly agitated.
Had you known about any problems between the defendant and Genesis other than that conversation?
I had. Harper had said that things would be easier if Genesis weren't around.
I want to turn to the day of the rehearsal. How did your day start?
Well, I got to the kitchen that day at Peony Estates around 11 a.m. to prepare for a long day of cooking.
Did you see the defendant when you got to the kitchen that time?
I did. Harper asked me to save some space on the counter for him so he could prepare some of the wedding gifts.
Do you know what kind of gifts the defendant was preparing?
I do. Harper was preparing bottles of the 2017 Horizon brand wine, but I did notice that one of the bottles was different.
What do you mean by that?
One of the bottles was a 2019 brand Carol wine. When I asked Harper why it was different, he said it was for Genesis, and it was a gift for Genesis that would be something special that would take care of their problems forever.
What happened after the defendant said that the bottle would take care of her problems with Genesis forever?
Well, I noticed a pesticide sprayer bottle sitting on the counter, and when I asked Harper why it was there, she said it was to kill pests like Genesis.
After you heard the defendant say that the pesticides were there to kill pests like Genesis, what happened next?
Well, I had gone out to the parking lot and I heard Genesis and Harper shouting at each other.
Did you hear what they were saying?
I did. I heard Genesis say, "You think you know what's best for Casey, but you have no idea." I walked away after that, so I don't know what else was said.
I want to go back to that special bottle of wine you mentioned. Did you ever see Miss Petrillo get that bottle?
I did. Harper asked me to give it to Genesis instead of him.
I had given it to Genesis, and Harper emphasized over and over again that Genesis should drink it when they were alone and that the wine was just for Genesis.
After that rehearsal dinner, where Genesis Petrillo got that special bottle of wine, did you ever see or hear from her again?
No, I did not. I had found out the next day that Genesis had passed away.
Thank you. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Sorry.
Yeah, you're good. Go ahead when you're ready.
All right. Second. All right. Miss Arnold, when you were at Peony Estates in November of 2018, you saw the defendant with pesticide. Is this correct?
That is correct. She was carrying it past the employees only door.
Did you see where the defendant put the pesticide?
Can you repeat the question?
Did you see where the defendant put the pesticide?
No, I didn't see what happened after she went into that room.
So you cannot be sure where exactly the defendant put the pesticide, correct?
I guess not exactly, no.
And did you ever see the defendant personally handle pesticide?
Well, yes, carrying the bottle. She was handling it.
But did you ever see the defendant use the pesticide?
No, I did not. I wasn't there enough to see her use it.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
There's no redirect based on that. Can Miss Arnold step down?
Absolutely. And plaintiff, when you're ready, get your next witness up there. And before we proceed into this next witness, I'm going to make a slight suggestion. If it's not feasible, don't do it. But I think it would be helpful to have the crossing attorney on camera. This is just the way I've seen it done before, to have the crossing attorney on camera during the direct, just in case you want to jump in there and make an objection. It just makes it like more timely. So all you have to do is mute and unmute. So that's just a suggestion that I have for y'all. If it's not possible, don't worry about it. And plaintiff, when you're ready, you can call your witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff calls Dr. Jimin Kwan to the stand.
All right.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hello, my name is Dr. Jimin Kwan.
What do you do for a living, Dr. Kwan?
I'm the chief emergency physician at River Valley Hospital here in Midlands.
What is your educational background?
I got my bachelor's degree in biology from Georgia Tech, then went to UNC for medical school, and then I did a fellowship in medical toxicology and a residency in emergency medicine at Emory.
You mentioned medical toxicology. What exactly is that?
Medical toxicology is the diagnosis, management, and prevention of poisoning, whether that's from medications, toxins, or other things that the body doesn't like.
Where have you worked in the past, Dr. Kwan?
I've been in emergency rooms for nearly 2 decades now. I started out as a physician at St. Joseph's Hospital, then became a senior physician, and for the past 5 years, I've been the chief emergency physician at River Valley Hospital.
Have you ever published anything in your field?
I have actually. I've written multiple articles in toxicology, including an article about common misdiagnoses in toxicology.
Let's talk about why you're here today. How did you become involved in this case?
On June 8th, 2019, I actually treated Genesis Petrillo.
When treating a patient, what method do you use?
I approach every case in the same way. I try to understand a patient's symptoms and background, and then diagnose and treat them based on any ailment that they may have.
Are these methods considered reliable in your field?
Yes, I've been treating patients in emergency rooms for nearly 2 decades now, and I've been using the same methods, and all of the other doctors at the hospital have also been using those methods.
What materials did you review?
Well, in addition to all of the firsthand knowledge I have of Genesis Petrillo's condition, I had the affidavit of Angel Rodriguez, multiple toxicology reports, and an analysis of a wine bottle that was found at Peony Estates.
Were these materials sufficient to reach your conclusion?
They were.
Did you reliably apply your methods to the facts and data of this case?
I did.
Now let's talk about the day Genesis Petrillo came into the hospital. What happened when you first met Genesis Petrillo?
Genesis Petrillo came into the hospital with Angel Rodriguez. She was exhibiting symptoms of nausea, and I learned that she had been drinking wine the night before, and I was able to corroborate that through her vomit.
What did you believe the diagnosis was initially?
Well, initially, based on the nausea, the slurred speech, and the stomach pains, I thought that Genesis Petrillo was suffering from alcohol poisoning. However, when I then conducted a full examination, I found multiple symptoms, including contracted pupils, a slowed pulse, and muscle spasms that alcohol poisoning couldn't cause. So I was able to rule that cause out.
What was your response after you found all of these symptoms inconsistent with alcohol poisoning?
Based on those inconsistent symptoms, I ordered a toxicology report and a poisons and toxins analysis. At that point, I believed that Genesis Petrillo had ingested an organophosphate pesticide.
Now, what are organophosphate pesticides?
They're a class of insecticides that we normally use to kill insects, but they can be very harmful to humans. If those pesticides get inside of our bloodstream, they can make the body stop producing an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase.
What does that chemical do?
Well, that chemical, it's used by the body to regulate muscle function. So when the body doesn't have enough acetylcholinesterase, it can't properly communicate with the muscles, and that makes bodily function stop.
I want to talk more about this poison. How can you determine whether someone has been exposed to insecticide?
Doctors are able to use low acetylcholinesterase levels as a conclusive diagnosis of insecticide poisoning.
Were you able to find evidence of low amounts of that chemical?
I was actually, in Genesis Petrillo's toxicology report.
At this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to enter pre-admitted Exhibit 5. May we show it to the members of the jury on the screen?
Yeah, if it's pre-admitted, then absolutely.
It is. Can you identify this document, Dr. Kwan?
I can. This is Genesis Petrillo's blood analysis that I ordered. And if you could go to the next slide. In that blood analysis, I found that Genesis Petrillo's acetylcholinesterase levels were low. And in fact, they were half of the minimum reference range that would be normal for someone.
Thank you. On the morning of June 8th, what happened to Genesis Petrillo?
Well, once I determined that Genesis Petrillo was suffering from organophosphate pesticide poisoning, I had given her an antidote. But by that point, it was too late. Genesis Petrillo fell into a coma, and a few hours later at 9:27 a.m., she died. I reported that her cause of death was respiratory failure due to those organophosphate pesticides. And my next step was to try and figure out how those pesticides got into her body.
You said earlier that the insecticides are deadly if they enter the bloodstream. How can insecticide enter the bloodstream?
Well, there are three different pathways through which insecticides can enter the body. They can be inhaled through the air, they can be absorbed through the skin, or they can be orally ingested.
Did you find which pathway likely occurred in this case?
I did. There were no skin rashes or any signs of absorbing through the skin, so I was able to rule that out. And then based on the time frame of the symptoms and the order that symptoms presented, I was able to rule out air inhalation. So that left oral ingestion as the only possible pathway.
So, were you able to determine how Genesis Petrillo ingested the poison?
Yes. I found that the most likely cause was the wine that she consumed earlier that night based on a laboratory report that I received.
Now, referencing pre-admitted Exhibit 10, would you mind pulling that up? What is this document?
This is a toxicology report for a bottle of Cara wine. I learned from Angel Rodriguez's affidavit that Genesis Petrillo had been given a bottle of Cara the night before that she then drank at her wedding rehearsal.
Did anything stand out to you from this document?
Yes, if you go to the next slide, there were high levels of isofenfos present in this bottle. And isofenfos, that's just the chemical name for that organophosphate pesticide. So that would mean that those pesticides were present in this bottle. I also found evidence of isofenfos in Genesis Petrio's toxins analysis.
Now referencing pre-admitted Exhibit 6, can you identify this document, Dr. Kwan?
Yes, this is the poisons and toxins analysis for Genesis Petrio.
Now, what did this analysis show you?
If you go to the next slide, I found that isofenfos were present in both Genesis Petrio's stomach and blood, just like in the bottle of Cara that was found at Peony Estates.
Thank you. You can take the slides down. Dr. Kwan, were you able to make a conclusion about Genesis Petrio's cause of death?
Yes, I concluded to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that on the evening of June 7th, 2019, Genesis Petrio consumed wine contaminated with an organophosphate pesticide, which then led to the respiratory failure that caused her death.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may.
Good morning, Dr. Kwan.
Good morning.
Now, you are on the board of directors for Organic Solutions. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, this is an organization that opposes the use of chemical pesticides, right?
Yes.
And you personally believe that chemical pesticides are inherently a scourge on the environment.
Yes, they do great harm to our natural world and can also cause harm to humans.
That's right. You believe they are an immense danger to humanity, right?
Well, that's right. Just a small amount being ingested in the body can cause death.
So in this case, you did administer the organophosphate antidote to Genesis Petrio, right?
I did.
And that treatment was unsuccessful, correct?
Yes, that treatment only works if we administer it early enough, and by the time Genesis Petrio had come to the hospital, the symptoms had progressed too far for that antidote to be successful.
Well, let's talk about other reasons it may have been unsuccessful. Now, Dr. Kwan, when Genesis Petrio came to the ER, they were heavily intoxicated, right?
Well, I'm not sure about heavily intoxicated, but yes, they had consumed alcohol.
Well, they did have slurred speech, correct?
Yes.
They smelled of alcohol.
Yes.
And they had vomited wine onto themselves, correct?
That's right.
And in fact, Petrio told you that they had been drinking a lot of wine that evening.
Yes.
Now, isn't it true that Genesis Petrio's blood alcohol content was measured at 0.16%?
That's right. At the time of the hospital, that's what the blood alcohol content was.
That's right. Depending upon the rate of consumption, it could have been higher previous to that, correct?
Yes, it could have been higher than 0.16.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Is there a redirect for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Dr. Kwan, does your connection to Doctors for Organic Solutions have any effect on the conclusions that you have made in this case?
No, my work with that organization has nothing to do with my conclusions about Genesis Petrio's death.
And why did you change your initial diagnosis of alcohol poisoning to pesticide poisoning?
Well, because of those inconsistent symptoms. Yes, Genesis Petrio had consumed alcohol, but the amount of alcohol in her system didn't actually cause her death. Those symptoms, like contracted pupils, slowed pulse, and muscle spasms, were all from the organophosphate pesticide. And by the time Genesis Petrio got to the hospital, their BAC was only 0.16, not high enough to cause death hours later.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. No further questions at this time.
Is there a recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
All right. Then Dr. Kwan can be excused. Thank you.
Your Honor, the plaintiff rests our case in chief and requests a 5-minute break before the defense's case in chief.
Yeah, we can do 5 minutes. All right, I will see y'all in 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yep. All right, I am ready to go if both sides are back. Can somebody just come on real quick and confirm that your teammates are good to go?
Plaintiff is good to go.
Great. Defense?
Defense is also prepared to proceed.
All right then. Defense, call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would call Casey Soto to the stand.
I am Casey Soto.
Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Casey Soto. I'm the only child of Harper Martini, and Genesis Petrillo was my fiance.
What was your early relationship with Harper Martini like?
Harper was my only parent, and he worked very hard. Harper was the best dad I could ever hope for while I was growing up. He made it to every school play and soccer game and really cared about me.
And how did your relationship with Genesis begin?
In May 2012, my friend Drew Matsukas invited me to a party where I met Genesis, and we started dating about a month later.
And how long was it before you introduced Genesis to your father?
We had been dating for 3 years before I invited Genesis to come to Harper's house for dinner. And things were intense at the time, but most fathers are protective of their only child.
Why were things tense?
Well, at the dinner in 2015, Genesis had accidentally insulted Harper's wine, and Harper later complained to me about this, but I just knew he was just being overprotective.
And how did your relationship with Genesis develop moving forward?
Well, on July 18th, 2018, Genesis proposed to me, and I've been planning to pop the question myself, but Genesis beat me to it, and Harper did seem upset at first.
What happened afterwards?
Well, we originally wanted to have our wedding at Rosie and Pedro, but Harper convinced us that the publicity from having our own wedding at Peony Estates would be better, and he offered to pay for a large part of the ceremony.
What kind of relationship did Genesis and Harper have during the wedding planning?
Oh, Harper and Genesis were often arguing about catering and other aspects of the wedding preparation, but they never made any serious threats to each other. Genesis and Harper both cared about me despite their disagreements.
How did the rehearsal the day before the wedding go?
Genesis and Harper were still bickering, and I considered calling the wedding off. But Genesis told me she wanted nothing more than to marry me, and Genesis and Harper seemed to avoid each other for most of the night.
What happened around 10 p.m. that night?
Well, Harper came out with a bottle of wine and offered it in plain view of everyone to Genesis as a sort of burying the hatchet gesture. Genesis brought the one bottle back to the table, poured a couple of glasses of wine. I didn't have any, but someone else might have.
What happened around 8 a.m. the day of the wedding?
Harper came to my door and told me that Genesis had gone missing. She seemed to believe that Genesis had bailed on the wedding. And around 8:30, Angel Rodriguez came into my room and told me that Genesis was in a coma. I arrived at the hospital 5 minutes after Genesis was declared dead.
What did you do after learning that?
I was in shock. I broke down and couldn't stop crying. I couldn't even stand up. Yeah, that day was the worst experience of my life. And after grieving, I went to France to get away from everything for a while, and I came back to Midlands in January of this year. Harper and Genesis, they may have argued with each other at times, but I know Harper cared about me just as much as Genesis did, and I can't imagine him doing anything that would hurt me, and that includes hurting Genesis.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
You met Genesis Petrillo in 2012,
Yes, I did.
but you waited until 2015 to introduce Genesis to the defendant.
Yes, I did.
And that was the very first time that Genesis met the defendant, but the two of them already had problems.
Yes.
Genesis thought that your father's wine tasted cheap.
She did, yes.
Since then, the defendant would complain about Ms. Petrillo constantly.
He would, yes.
In fact, you've had to calm him down when the defendant was in the same room as Ms. Petrillo.
I did. There was some diffusion of tensions that were necessary.
In July of 2018, you got engaged to your now late fiance.
Yes.
The defendant had a negative reaction to this news.
Yes, he did. He was upset, to say the least.
Moving on to the wedding planning process, the defendant offered to fund a large portion of your wedding.
He did, yes.
In exchange, you agreed to have said wedding at Peony Estates.
Yes.
And you had plans to move with Miss Petrillo to France after the wedding.
Yes, she got a job offer down there, and so we were gonna pack up and go.
But you never told your father the news.
I did not. The news reached him by other means.
The defendant only found out after Miss Petrillo told him about the plans.
Yes.
And this angered the defendant?
It did. I mean, any reasonable father would be. I probably should have told him myself, actually.
And the defendant said that he didn't care if Genesis moved off to France or ended up 6 feet under.
He did. They said a lot of things to each other in moments of heat. So that was one incident.
Let's talk about what happened a few weeks later on June 7th, the day of the rehearsal. On June 7th, the defendant and Miss Petrillo got into another argument.
They did.
It got to the point where you considered canceling the wedding.
Yeah, it was just getting to a point where I was just done at that point.
Yet when you spoke to the defendant, he agreed with you as well, right?
He did, obviously. I mean, obviously.
And he didn't seem worried about the business he mentioned that you would gain having the wedding at Peony Estates.
No, he wasn't quite concerned about that as much. I just think he just really did not want that wedding to happen.
He told you that you can't let Genesis break up our family.
Yeah, he thought I was going to go to France, probably never call him again and everything like that. So, I mean, reasonable, only parent issues.
But yes, he said that.
Yeah, he did.
Later that night, the defendant gave Miss Petrillo a special bottle of wine.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that wine was called Cara.
He did, yes.
You saw Miss Petrillo pour multiple glasses of the Cara wine?
Yep, she did.
After that, you went back to your room for the night, correct?
Yes, I was tired.
And that was the last time you ever saw Miss Petrillo alive?
Yes.
And just to be very clear, this is because Miss Petrillo died of pesticide poisoning that next morning?
Not quite sure. There's like conflicting results. She could have. I heard something about alcohol. I really didn't care at the time. I just was done at that point.
But Miss Petrillo did die, correct?
She did, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, is there a redirect for this witness?
A redirect, Your Honor.
All right, then this witness may be excused. Defense, next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would like to call Harper Martini to the stand.
All right, you may proceed when you're ready.
I'm so sorry, I did not catch that. What'd you say?
You can go ahead and start.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. Please state your name and occupation for the benefit of the court.
Sure. My name's Harper Martini. I'm the owner of Peony Estates.
And what's your educational background?
Yeah, I had got a bachelor's in horticulture and business from Midland State University.
And when did you start working in the wine industry?
Well, my family has been involved in the wine business like ever since I was a kid. I got my first real job, I guess, in college. It was at Cumberland's Food or Farm Winery.
And when did you open your own winery?
I believe it was January of 2015.
What all goes on at Peony Estates?
We have a lot of stuff. I mean, obviously the winery part. Aside from that, we also host events, and we also have a bed and breakfast.
And what would you say put Peony Estates on the map?
In 2017, Savior Magazine did an article that said that we were an essential stop.
Objection, Your Honor, to relevance.
Yeah, counsel, what fact does this make more or less likely in today's case?
This goes to show the dedication that the defendant has to this winery and how much it means to them.
May I respond?
You may.
Your Honor, the question as phrased was what put Peony Estates on the map? That's a question about how their business was being run and how successful they were. It has nothing to do with the facts of this case or to the charge or to the lawsuit being brought in this case. So it's not relevant at all.
Defense counsel, I will take another response. How can you tie this specific piece of information to the charge in this case?
We would like to prove that the defendant would not have poisoned Genesis Petrillo because of their dedication to not only their winery, but also to their son.
And how does that relate to the charge specifically? Like what element of the charge does that relate to?
The intention of the battery.
May I respond to that?
No, I'm going to overrule that and let this testimony in.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure.
What would you say put Peony Estates on the map?
Yeah, as I was saying, Savior Magazine did an article. It said that we were an essential stop in the Winery Valley, and that really got us a lot of publicity. And ever since then, people were booking lots of events for us. We were booked like 2 years in advance.
All right. And what is your relationship with your son like?
Casey and I have a great relationship. Casey's helped me so much with making the winery, with the bed and breakfast aspect, the website, the name, and I've been planning on leaving the winery to Casey.
And what was your relationship with Genesis Petrillo like?
To be honest, it was very rocky. I love Casey, but the one problem with him, I guess, is that his friends, specifically Genesis, I just didn't think was a good match for Casey. Ultimately, though, I care about Casey. I wanted him to be happy, so I tried my best just to make peace with Genesis in multiple ways.
And what did you do to try and make peace with Genesis?
A lot of things. I hosted the engagement party. That was on July 21st of 2018. I also went to lunch with Genesis in January of 2019. She kept on canceling it, but we finally found a date and she agreed to it. And I went to lunch. I just told her that I wanted nothing more than Casey's happiness. And if that meant that they needed to get married, then so be it. I just wanted a good relationship with them. I wanted to bury the hatchet for once and for all. That's what I had had a conversation with Casey about, and he had just begged me to do that. So at the engagement party, also another time, I had a whole peace plan that I had planned, and I was going to give Genesis the first bottle of Cara wine.
And after the rehearsal dinner, did anything occur?
Yeah, I woke up around 2:30 a.m. in the morning. That it would be January 8th of 2019. And I received a panic phone call from one of my employees at the estate. And the employee said that someone had been rushed to the hospital after last night. I assumed that it was Genesis just because she was drinking a lot of alcohol. I'd seen her at the party doing that, so I thought she probably drank too much.
And did you go to the hospital to see Genesis Petrillo?
No, as I assumed, I thought it was just alcohol poisoning.
And would you ever think about hurting Casey?
Oh, absolutely not.
And would you ever do anything to hurt the winery?
No, I mean, I've invested everything into this winery, and so has Casey, which is why I wanted to leave it to him.
All right, no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Your daughter, Casey, and Miss Petrillo started dating in 2015, right?
My son, Casey.
Your son, excuse me.
They started dating in 2015, although I didn't know about it until a little bit later.
It's your wish that Miss Petrillo had never met Casey, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was a great relationship.
You thought that Miss Petrillo was a bad influence on Casey.
I did.
You thought that because of Miss Petrillo, Casey wouldn't want to take over Peony Estates from you.
I was fearing that that would be one of the reasons, because Genesis was always just from the first time that I met her saying negative things about Peony Estates.
That's a yes to my question, that you thought because of Miss Petrillo, Casey wouldn't want to take over Peony Estates from you.
I said I feared that that could be a result of it, and it seemed likely because they went to France and didn't want to have anything to do with it, or that's what they're planning to do.
Miss Petrillo and Casey dated for about 5 years before they decided to get married. That's true?
Well, 2015, so it would be 4 years because the wedding ceremony, and that was in 2019.
When they decided to get married, you weren't happy about that at all, were you?
Yeah, I mean, as I think I made clear, I didn't think it was a great influence, so I would rather it have not happened.
You thought that Miss Petrillo did nothing but to try and further divide you from your son.
Yeah, I mean, that's our interactions. That's always what was coming out of Genesis.
So you decided to get lunch with Miss Petrillo a few months before the wedding, right?
Yeah, as I was explaining, despite that rocky relationship, Casey told me that he really wanted this to work. So I made that effort to have lunch and to kind of extend the olive branch and make peace.
When you had that lunch, Miss Petrillo said something to you about a move, right?
Yes.
She told you that she didn't think Casey was going to tell you about it, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And Casey hadn't told me about this plan of moving to France.
You didn't find out about that until a few months after that lunch, right?
Yes. So there was, in writing, I got a letter explaining from Genesis.
Well, actually, a few months later, just before the wedding, you got a voicemail from Miss Petrillo. Isn't that true?
Yes.
In that voicemail, Miss Petrillo told you that after the wedding, she planned on moving to France with Casey.
Yeah.
When you heard that, you were upset, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, just learning, like, I had no idea. So, yeah, I mean, it was a shocker for me, and I wasn't happy about it.
Miss Petrillo told you that you would never see Casey again, right?
Yes, as well as that our grandkids, if they had any.
That's right, sir. Miss Petrillo even told you that you wouldn't see your grandchildren ever, right?
Yeah, I just said that.
That made you upset.
I mean, yeah, reasonably, any potential grandpa would want to see their grandkids. So, I mean,
I'm not talking about any potential grandma, sir. I'm talking about you.
yeah, I mean, of
Didn't
course,
it?
I would want to see my potential grandkids.
In that moment, you thought that Miss Petrillo was the biggest mistake in Casey's life, right?
Yes.
You called Miss Petrillo the next day, didn't you?
Yes.
You told her that there was nothing you wouldn't do to protect your only child, right?
Yeah, I would do whatever would be the best thing for Casey.
You told her that not even running to France could save Genesis from your wrath. Am I getting that right?
Yes, that was part of the things that I said.
I want to talk about what you did in the weeks leading up to the wedding. You recognize a copy of a note that you gave to Miss Petrillo a week before the wedding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Sikowski, can we pull up Exhibit 24? And Your Honor, this is constructively outside the view of the jury. I'm going to enter it into evidence, and then we'll have it in front of the jury.
Sure.
Sir, you recognize this as a copy of the note you wrote and gave to Genesis Petrillo, right?
Yes.
This is your handwriting.
Yeah, I wrote that.
Those are your initials at the bottom, HM.
Yep.
Your Honor, at this point, we entered this into evidence as Exhibit 24.
Objections to this being entered?
No, Your Honor.
All right, it's entered.
You gave this note to Ms. Petrillo at the end of May of 2019, right?
Yeah.
That was about a week before the wedding.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it would be about a week.
You wrote, "I need you out of our lives," right?
Yep.
You wrote, "Leave Casey, and the enclosed $300,000 is yours."
Yes. And she actually took that, even though she didn't leave.
Right, along with this letter, you actually gave Ms. Petrillo $300,000, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I gave it thinking that maybe she'd reconsider, but she actually
She never
didn't
returned that
reconsider.
money to you, did she?
Correct. She took it anyways.
You wrote, "Otherwise, I'll take you out of the picture the hard way," didn't you?
Yep.
You ended this letter by warning Ms. Petrillo to choose wisely. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's in the letter.
Thank you, Mr. Kowski. We can take that down now. Mr. Martini, Ms. Petrillo didn't leave Casey after that, did she?
No.
She went through with the wedding, right?
I mean, yeah.
I want to talk about what you did because of that. On your vineyard, you use pesticides to kill pests, don't you?
Yes, we use pesticides at our vineyard.
Since you're the owner of your vineyard, you have unrestricted access to those pesticides, don't you?
I mean, sure, anyone who works at Peony Estates, we know where they are.
You've handled those pesticides before, right?
Usually, Austin Lewis is what he's kind of in charge of the more agricultural side of it, so he handles it more. But I know where they are, and I know I've handled them before on occasion.
That's a yes to my question that you've handled them before, isn't it?
I told you I have, although usually I run the more business side of Peony Estates, so I don't do it normally.
You know how dangerous pesticides can be to a person's health, right?
Sure.
You gave Miss Petrillo a bottle of wine at her wedding rehearsal, right?
I did, yeah.
You know that Miss Petrillo drank that wine, am I right?
Yes.
The morning after Miss Petrillo drank from that wine, she died from pesticide poisoning, didn't she?
She did die.
You'd agree that you're happy Miss Petrillo is no longer in your life, right?
No, because Casey was like heartbroken, and that didn't make me happy.
Sir, is it your testimony today that you're not happy Miss Petrillo is no longer in your life?
I am glad, I guess, that they didn't get married. I didn't want that to happen, but the way that it occurred, and Petrillo having to die and that making Casey heartbroken is not something that I would have wished.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Is there a redirect for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Mr. Martini, you love your son, correct?
Yeah, I do.
And you would do anything to keep your winery and your son well?
Absolutely. Those are the two things, honestly, that I have in this life and that I really care about.
No further questions, Your Honor.
I'm assuming there's no recross.
Recross, Your Honor.
All right, then defense, next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Defense calls Blaine Osborne to the stand.
All right.
Blair Osborne, excuse me.
Go ahead.
Would you please state your name for the record?
I'm sorry?
Would you please state your name for the record?
Yes, my name's Blair Osborne.
And could you tell us what you do for a living, Miss Osborne?
Yes, I am the founder and owner of Bliss by Blair Events, my private event planning business, and that was voted #1 in the Red River Valley 4 times. I'm the CEO, CFO, and whatever other roles there are, being the executive of my business.
So in your time as the executive and CEO and all of that, did you ever have cause to interact with Harper Martini or Peony Estates?
I did, yes, quite often.
And how did you meet Harper Martini?
Well, Harper got me out of a major bind in the spring of 2015. I was a new event planner, and I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I was really struggling to stay organized, and I made the mistake of double booking events all the time. But this one day, I found myself with a birthday party that refused to end and a wedding reception eager to start. And I had booked them for the same ballroom. So I was desperate for an alternative space. I called every nearby location I could think of with event space, and Harper picked up the phone and told me I could hold the wedding reception at Peony Estates. And the evening was, of course, a huge success, and so much so that Bliss by Blair Events and Peony Estates began this amazing partnership together.
Thank you. Could you elaborate on that partnership with more specifics?
Yes, of course. I hosted 83 events in total and have had several pre-event meetings at Peony Estates. And I had a warm, of course, professional relationship with Harper and her staff at Peony Estates. Unfortunately, though, I have had to terminate my professional relationship with Peony Estates for the time being after the unfortunate event with Genesis.
Were you involved in the planning of Casey Soto and Janice Petrio's wedding?
Yes, Harper hired Bliss by Blair to plan their wedding at Peony Estates on June 8th, 2019.
How did that planning go?
Well, when Harper asked me to plan Casey and Genesis's wedding, I was so excited. And immediately I said yes because I had such a good relationship with Harper. But that was before I realized this wedding would literally be the worst professional experience of my life.
Why would you characterize it that way?
Well, to be completely honest, it seemed like this wedding was doomed from the start. I began to work on the event in the fall of 2018. I contacted possible vendors, drew up inspiration boards. However, between everyone's testy emotions, conflicts occurred like way too often between Casey, Genesis, and Harper. As a result of that and my occasional logistical shortcomings, I mean, who doesn't have those? Dates got confused, planning documents went missing, vendors got fired and rehired sometimes more than once in a day. It was total chaos and I felt completely out of control. I still can't tell you whose idea it was to hire the caterer, Sam Arnold. I mean, I definitely can't remember everything that went wrong during the planning. It was just way too much.
Thank you, Ms. Osborne. Now I'd like to talk more specifically about the evening of June 7th, the date of the rehearsal. Did you observe any disagreements or conflicts that night?
Yeah, unfortunately I did. Genesis and Harper were often antagonizing each other whenever they were together. They had a disagreement during the rehearsal, but I didn't really hear specifics since I was working with the videography team to make sure everything was absolutely perfect. But the arguing got to the point that I was instructed to keep them away from each other as much as possible.
And did you do that?
Well, I couldn't really manage it 100%. Harper and Genesis seemed to naturally repel each other, but when they were together, they kept insulting each other in front of the guests, even during the toasting.
Did this continue throughout the duration of the night?
Well, fortunately not. I was trying to figure out how to prevent this major showdown in front of the guests, but towards the end of the night, Harper actually seemed eager to smooth things over.
Why do you say that?
Well, during dessert, Harper gave Genesis this beautiful bottle of wine from Peony Estates and gave a really heartfelt toast. I honestly didn't expect such a genuine and lovely speech from Harper, and it was so touching that I teared up a bit. It really seems like Harper buried the hatchet right then and there, which just showed how much Harper loved Casey, really.
Objection, that answers speculation.
Response.
Your Honor, this is rationally based upon the witness's perception of the events and the emotions at the events, and they're simply giving their perspective on the situation.
Oh, sorry.
No, yeah, go ahead and respond.
I don't believe that Ms. Osborne here can testify to what Harper Martini's actions were.
I'm sorry. So you objected to speculation. Are you referring to like mindset, or are you referring to actions? Because I do think a witness can testify to actions. I don't think they can testify to a mindset.
I'll clear my point. I don't think that they can testify to the mindset of Harper Martini.
Defense counsel, what foundation have you laid that this is a rationally based perception?
Your Honor, the witness has, we've laid foundation that the witness has a personal relationship with Harper Martini and has an extensive personal relationship. And in addition, the witness was there throughout the duration of the preparations of the wedding and has observed the interactions between Genesis Petrillo and Harper Martini throughout. And at this point, this witness is giving her perception on this conflict and the details of it.
Yeah, I'm going to rule on this. I don't think we can get into this witness's brain or into Martini's brain to know exactly what the intent behind her actions were. So I'm going to sustain that.
Thank you, Your
Yes,
Honor.
Your Honor.
Strike that testimony from the record. But specifically, this shows how much she loved whatever.
The speculative comment. All right.
That specifically.
Now, Ms. Osborne, to clarify, when Harper Martini gave this gift to Ms. Petrillo, who was present?
Well, he gave the bottle to Genesis in front of the entire group at the reception dinner.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Hello, Mrs. Osborne. On May 11th, you heard a voicemail from Genesis Petrillo to the defendant, right?
That's correct.
After hearing that voicemail, the defendant told you, one of these days, Genesis will drink the wrong thing and it will kill Genesis, right?
That's true.
And on that same night, you heard the defendant on a call angrily say, no, keep the Cara bottle where it is.
That's true, along with some other things.
Yeah. Speaking of those other things, you heard the defendant say right after that, no, don't have them move the pesticide, right?
Objection, Your Honor. This is objection to the relevance of this, as the prejudicial value significantly outweighs any probative value it may have, as this witness didn't hear the entirety of the conversation and doesn't know the context.
Okay, so are we making a 403 more prejudicial than probative objection?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so response on the grounds of 403, counsel.
Your Honor, I believe that this testimony is relevant because it demonstrates it demonstrates how the wine bottle of Cara wine was kept close to pesticides, allowing for the defendant Harper Martini to easily contaminate the wine with the purpose of harming Genesis Petrillo.
Defense counsel, response.
Your Honor, no foundation has been laid that this witness has any personal knowledge of the details of this conversation and whether or not the location of the bottle of Cara wine was in fact in relation to the pesticides, as this witness didn't hear both sides of the conversation.
On the grounds of 403, I don't think that there's this like substantial risk of prejudice that's outweighing, the probative value. So I'm going to overrule that. Counsel, I would encourage, cross-examination. Wait, is this cross-examination? Never mind, continue.
This is a cross-examination, yes. Should I repeat the question, Ms. Osborne?
Yes, please, thank you.
So, on the same night, you heard that the defendant on a call angrily say, no, keep the Cara bottle where it is, right?
That's true.
And you also heard the defendant say in that conversation, no, don't have them move the pesticides.
That's true, but I don't know where either of those, where the bottle or the pesticides were.
Well, let's talk about what you know from the rehearsal. On the day of the rehearsal, Genesis Petrillo and the defendant got into a disagreement, right?
That is true, yes.
And on that same day, the defendant gave Ms. Petrillo the bottle of Cara wine.
Yes, that's true. It had been planned before.
You heard the defendant say when she gave the wine, I got this just for you, but don't open it in front of other people.
That's true.
You also heard the defendant say, I want this special bottle to be just for you when you have a private moment to reflect on everything that you have done.
That's true.
And after you heard that, you saw Miss Petrillo open the bottle and drink the wine, correct?
That's not correct.
I'm sorry, is it your testimony today that you didn't see that happen?
No, well, I didn't see the specifics of anything. I didn't see what the bottle of wine said. I'm
not asking you to talk about what you saw on the bottle of wine. I'm asking you if you saw Genesis Petrillo drink from that bottle of wine that the defendant handed her.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I misunderstood the question.
That's all right. You didn't see anyone else drink from that wine, correct?
I did not, no. I don't know if someone else did drink from the wine. I was so busy with the night.
But just to be clear, you never saw anyone else drink from that wine?
I did not see it, no.
And the next morning, after you saw Miss Petrillo drinking that wine the defendant gave her the night before, Miss Petrillo died from pesticide poisoning. Is that correct?
To the best of my knowledge, that's correct. Well, actually, I just know that Miss Petrillo died. I don't really know the specifics of what the cause was.
Well, as stated in your affidavit, isn't it true that you know that Miss Petrillo died from pesticide poisoning?
Yes. I don't know. I've heard differing things, but yes, that is what I said.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Now, Ms. Osborne, on cross-examination, counsel brought up a phone call that you overheard with Harper Martini. Did you know who Mr. Martini was speaking to?
No, I did not.
And did you know the context of what you heard from Mr. Martini?
No, I have no idea what the context was.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Is there a recross? I assume we don't have time for a recross.
No recross, Your Honor.
All right. The witness can be excused. Defense, I'm going to assume that you're resting your case here.
Yes, Your Honor. At this point, the defense rests.
All right. Do we have time for like 5 minutes before closings? I don't remember what time all loss is, but I feel like we're not going to hit it.
The plaintiff would like 5 minutes just before the closing, if that's all right with you, Your Honor.
Fine by me. We can come back in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Love the pet parade. It's the best part of virtual mock trial. Just the random animals that come in and out of the picture. I'm back and ready to go. Closers, are we back and ready to go?
Plaintiff's ready.
Great. Defense?
The defense is also ready.
Great. So plaintiff, go ahead when you're ready.
May I proceed?
Yeah, go ahead.
May it please the court. The defendant promised and the defendant delivered. Members of the jury, this is Genesis Petrillo, a sister, a daughter, a friend, and a soon-to-be bride. She had plans to move to France as a newlywed, start up a career in a new place, and have a happy life. But those plans were cut short and her dreams were crushed when her life ended on the morning of her wedding. You see, the night before, Miss Petrillo was given a bottle of wine with poison in it. The person who gave her this bottle of poisoned wine was the defendant, Harper Martini. That's why today we're suing the defendant for battery. Because throughout the course of this trial, we've shown you that the defendant's actions were the reason for this tragedy. But since we're the plaintiff in today's case, we couldn't just say that. We had to prove. We had to prove by a preponderance of the evidence, simply meaning that it was more likely than not that the defendant, Harper Martini, intentionally poisoned Genesis Petrillo's wine, and that poison was the cause of her death. We've met our burden in today's case because we showed you that the defendant promised and the defendant delivered. Let's talk about all the ways that we've met our burden in today's case. First, that the defendant poisoned Genesis Petrillo's wine. And second, that wine was the most likely cause of her death. Let's start with that first point, how we know the defendant poisoned Miss Petrillo's wine. You heard today from Miss Angel Rodriguez, one of the bridesmaids at the wedding. You heard from Miss Rodriguez that the defendant and Miss Petrillo would argue constantly. That it got to the point where Miss Rodriguez, on the day of the rehearsal, heard Miss Petrillo say that she was afraid that the defendant was going to kill her. Miss Rodriguez also told you on the night before Miss Petrillo's death, she overheard the defendant say directly to Miss Petrillo that she would make her disappear. Miss Rodriguez also told you that she saw the defendant carrying a can of pesticides into the kitchen and that the defendant told her the pesticides were for pests like Genesis. We also heard the same thing from Sam Arnold, the caterer for the wedding. On the night of the rehearsal dinner, Miss Arnold also saw the defendant carrying a bottle of pesticides into the wine storage room and heard him say the same thing that Miss Rodriguez did. But you don't even have to take Miss Rodriguez or Miss Arnold's words for it. We heard today from the defendant himself that he hated Miss Petrillo and that he would do anything to get him out of her out of his life. We heard from the defendant how it was his dream for Casey Soto to take over his business after he retired. That he hated Miss Petrillo for taking his child away from him and threatening to move to a different country. He hated Miss Petrillo from the beginning of their relationship all the way to the end. And we know that the defendant wasn't joking around when he said that, because we showed you a note that he wrote to Miss Petrillo a week before her death. Members of the jury, this is a confession. Look at the things that Miss Petrillo a week before her death is getting from the defendant. Members of the jury, Look at the things the defendant is telling Miss Petrillo. I need you out of our lives. Leave Casey, and the enclosed $300,000 is yours. Otherwise, I'll take you out of the picture the hard way. Choose wisely. The defendant's words speak for themselves. These aren't the words of a concerned parent or a concerned father. These are the words of a vindictive person promising to get rid of somebody who stood in his way. And we know that the defendant followed through on that promise. And that brings me to my second point, that we know the pesticides were what caused Ms. Petrillo's death. You heard from Dr. Kwan today, a medical doctor and an expert in the field of pesticide-related deaths. Dr. Kwan was the first physician to see Ms. Petrillo and the first to treat her for her sudden illness. And Dr. Kwan told us today that Ms. Petrillo showed textbook symptoms of pesticide poisoning, and that a later test of her stomach and blood contents proved that to be true. Dr. Kwan showed us how it's unlikely to be anything other than pesticide poisoning due to the specific symptoms that Ms. Petrillo showed. Dr. Kwan also analyzed a sample of the wine within Ms. Petrillo's stomach and the wine found in the bottle that the defendant gave. Dr. Kwan found that the pesticides were the same and concluded that the pesticides were the cause of Ms. Petrillo's death. The defense can get up here and talk about alcohol all they want. They can say that Ms. Petrillo was drinking alcohol and that she died as a result of that. But we know that the alcohol couldn't have been the cause of Ms. Petrillo's death for two reasons. Dr. Kwan told us that anything higher than her blood alcohol content of 1.6 would have caused her to die before even getting to the hospital. We also know that the symptoms Ms. Petrillo were exhibiting were consistent with pesticide poisoning, not just alcohol intake. So we know that it was more likely than not that Dr. Kwan's conclusions were correct, because the science doesn't lie. The evidence showed us that the most likely cause of Ms. Petrillo's death were the pesticides in that bottle of wine. Members of the jury, after looking at all of the evidence and all of the facts, it's clear. We've shown that when things didn't go his way, the defendant promised to take care of Ms. Petrillo the hard way. We've shown that he delivered on that promise. That's why we ask you to find the defendant liable for battery. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Defense, when you're ready.
May I proceed?
Yes, go ahead.
If it may please the court. Your Honor, throughout the course of the trial, my co-counsels and I have proven that civil battery did not occur. According to Burdett v. Copenhagen, the elements of criminal battery are as follows. It must be an act by the defendant. There must be an intent to cause harmful or offensive contact on part of the defendant, and harmful contact must come to the plaintiff. During the testimony heard today, it has been made clear that the defendant did not intend to cause harm to the late Genesis Petrillo. Therefore, this case does not fulfill all the requirements of civil battery. We have heard from multiple witnesses that the defendant dearly loved her child, Casey Soto, and would never do anything to harm him. This would include killing Soto's soon-to-be spouse, Genesis Petrillo. We saw Casey Soto testify that even though the defendant and Genesis Petrillo did not get along, he could never imagine the defendant hurting him or Genesis Petrillo. Next, we heard from the defendant, who testified that he would never do anything to hurt Soto or Peony Estates. We also heard the defendant tried to smooth things over. Lastly, Blair Osborne testified that the defendant and Petrillo did not get along. However, at the rehearsal dinner, the defendant seemed to bury the hatchet, has proved that the defendant did not have the intent of harming or killing Genesis Petrillo, only wanting a better relationship with the defendant's soon-to-be daughter-in-law. On the other hand, the plaintiff would have you believe that the only thing in the defendant's heart was hate, when in fact the biggest thing in the defendant's heart was reconciliation. The plaintiff called on Angel Rodriguez, Sam Arnold, and Dr. Jim Kwan today. Angel Rodriguez testified that she saw Genesis drink several glasses of wine and champagne, as well as order shots for everyone at the party. Rodriguez also testified that she found Petrillo slumped over in her sleep, snoring after all of this had occurred. Sam Arnold testified that she saw the defendant bring a canister of pesticide into the bottling area of the winery. However, she could not tell you whether the pesticides actually ended up being stored there or not. And in addition to this, Ms. Arnold never actually saw the defendant use pesticides in the multiple years that they have been working together. Dr. Jim Kwan is no better. He has made it quite clear that he is very opposed to the use of pesticides. This bias has been reflected in his conclusion. Despite Petrillo showing symptoms of alcohol poisoning, Dr. Kwan concluded that pesticide poisoning was the only possible cause of death. In addition to this, Dr. Kwan testified that even the smallest amount of pesticide can be lethal. However, as Angel Rodriguez testified, she swished a mouthful of the supposedly deadly wine and suffered no ill effects at all. Your Honor, throughout all the testimony today, we have heard differing accounts on the supposed actions of the defendant, Harper Martini. The plaintiff has tried to prove that the defendant promised and the defendant delivered. However, all we have heard from the plaintiff were uncertainties and what they deemed as irrefutable evidence. We have heard biased testimony and unlikelihoods. Nothing that the plaintiff has offered today has been concrete. Your Honor, the plaintiff has failed to prove that by a preponderance of evidence, the defendants did anything at all to harm the well-being of the deceased Genesis Petrillo. We ask that you side with the defense and find the defendant not liable today. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Plaintiff, do you have time for a rebuttal?
I think I have 1 minute and some change. Can I ask my timekeeper?
Yeah, absolutely.
You have 1 minute and 27 seconds.
Okay, yeah. Then I would like to do a rebuttal, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
May I proceed?
You may.
Members of the jury, defense counsel just got up here and said that our case rested on uncertainties. So I want to talk about how certain we are about some of the things that happened in this case. First, we are certain that Genesis Petrillo died from pesticide poisoning. Nobody in this trial today could get up to that stand and tell you otherwise. Dr. Kwan came up here and he told you specifically that every other cause of death was able to be ruled out by her symptoms and her condition. Let's talk about another certainty, that Harper Martini was the one who committed this act. We know Harper Martini's feelings about Miss Petrillo. We know that he hated her from the bottom of his heart. We know that he promised to take her out of the picture the hard way, and we know that he delivered. That's certain. Thank you. Nothing further.
Great, thank you. So give us just a second to submit our ballots. Also, I think it would be helpful just for the purpose of ranking if y'all could come on camera.
Yes, please.
Participate in the round so we can remember who you are.
Yeah, we don't on our ballots. It doesn't tell us like who the names of people are. It just kind of tells us like 1, 2, 3. It's just it's difficult unless we see you.
Great. Thank you guys.
All right, everything's submitted on my end. So whenever you're ready, Claudia.
Yeah, I'm good. I know they said send them a text when it's good, so I'll just text
Okay.
Gara.
Do you want us to introduce ourselves? You guys don't have to be on camera now, by the way. Now that we're done with that, you don't have to show us your beautiful faces if you don't want to. So I guess I'll start by introducing myself while Claudia is messaging. I am a 2L here at Wake Forest Law. I'm on national trial team with AAJ, and I'm on the trial bar.
Oh, hi, I am Claudia Cornelison. Obviously, that's the name you see. I am what am I? I am the head coach of Vanderbilt University's mock trial team. I did mock trial for so long. And yeah, I think, wait, what courtroom are we? Are we 8?
7, 8, something like that.
Anybody have an answer on that? Let's see. I can look
We're
at
in
this.
8.
Okay. Give us 1 second just to check with the people running the tournament. I think we can go into comments. All right, we're good. Andrew, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So there are individualized comments of like for the very specific stuff. I'm not going to go over them. I know you guys have lunch and want to get the hell out of here. So I'm going to try to go through these pretty quickly and give like broad overview points. So if you have any questions, you can always follow up with me afterwards and get my email if you have further questions. Overall, I think you guys did a good job, but it's early in the season and there's clearly stuff to work on. And so I'm going to try to go through the stuff that I think needs the most work, at least that though it came out to me. Overall cohesiveness was a problem. Sometimes I lost track during witnesses' directs of what the point was of the witnesses' testimony was. And this isn't like a shade to witnesses. I mean, this is a whole team thing. So I think go through some of these materials and make sure it's made clear to the judges at every step of the way why all the testimony matters and why all of the evidence matters. I mean, you can come in and close and like bring it all together and it can all come together in the end in a way as like a little joke. But really, when these competitions get later on and you're in regionals and stuff, it's most of your points comes from directs and crosses and stuff. For pretrial, I think there's a stipulation that there's like 2 different theories that plaintiff can run with. I think that you guys should really make it clear what theory you're running and what the stipulations are that affect the case based on that. Because the last round I saw of this ran a completely different theory on a completely different set. And I was a little confused at the start of the first like openings when I'm hearing about like how the defendant like killed this person. I was like, whoa, where the hell are we? So pre-trial, especially if you're on plaintiff side and you have to, you're making the decision, really want to lay that out to the judges, what theory you're running, what you're going to be trying to argue. You're outside of the ears of the jury in pre-trial, so you can say whatever the hell you want. Openings, the goal here is to tell the story, to frame the facts in the light most important to you, and the story is everything. As long, just don't argue and tell the story. I thought both themes were honestly weak and they were easily flippable. I thought of like immediate flips on both themes, and so I would consider retweaking these themes to kind of be more cohesive. And then another quick thing. Everyone keeps saying Genesis Petrillo. If you are an attorney, it is not Genesis Petrillo. It is Miss Petrillo or Mrs. Petrillo. If you are a witness who would have spoken to Genesis Petrillo, you would be saying Genesis because that's what you would have referred to them by, or you would be saying Mr. and Mrs. Petrillo. Big pet peeve, but I saw other teams do it, so I'm going to raise it here again. On directs, Zoom is different. So in person, the body language, head shaking, I don't notice that as much. But here in Zoom, I notice that a lot. Shaking your head left to right is an unconscious thing people do that signals that they don't believe what they're saying. Now, I know that's not what's happening here, but juries see people shaking their head as they testify, and there's a subconscious message that they're lying. So if your witnesses and your attorneys, be a little bit more conscious now that you're on Zoom about your head movements. When you're closing out a direct, it's no further questions at this time. When you don't say at this time, I know it's a big pet peeve thing. It's really small, but it signals that you're not going to come back on redirect or recross, which you might have to do. Attorneys, I thought generally you guys did a good job of keeping the spotlight on the witnesses. Shut up, let the witnesses talk. The witnesses are the ones testifying, not you. When you are leading back answers into your questions, keep those lead-ins as short as possible, because when you do it repeatedly and they're long, it comes across as you testifying, even if you're just repeating back verbatim the words that your witnesses used. So be careful about that. And when a witness's answer is just too long, just say, all right, Miss X or Miss or Mr. X witness, let's go through that piece by piece. You said X. Could you explain that? And just really take the time to break it up. I know that you guys actually have like witnesses that are really well prepared. So just go back through. Sometimes across the board, the answers were too long and I got lost. On crosses, a lot of compound questions. There's a lot of compound questions. Clean it up. Don't ask your conclusion question. This drives me nuts. When you're crossing, you want to take the horse, which is your witness, lead them all the way step by step to the water and tell them they should be drinking, and then walk away. That's it. If the horse doesn't drink, you can't make the horse drink. But when you ask your conclusion question after you've let them walk, you give them the opportunity to try to explain away all the crap you just made them look bad for. Don't give them that opportunity. Don't ask the conclusion question. Don't ask open-ended questions as well. When the witness gives you a BS answer, don't say, I'm not talking, I didn't ask you about this, I'm not talking. Don't say that. Just say, let me redirect. Don't cut them off either, by the way. Just say, let me redirect you to my question. I asked you, and just re-ask the question, right? That's all you have to do. On objections, there were 4 objections this entire trial. I counted at least like 15 off the top of my head that I would have personally objected to. Object more. Holy crap, please object more. Even if you think they have a good response, like they can go to X rule, point it out, and you will lose, skill check your opponents. Skill check them. Make them prove that they are good enough to respond accurately and correctly to win an objection. Don't just let them walk all over let the witnesses walk all over hearsay. It happened a whole bunch. When you guys are in objection battles, just listen and wait, and then just say, may I be heard, or may I respond? Some of you guys did it. Sometimes there was a bit of crosstalk. It's difficult with Zoom, but just listen, wait, may I be heard? Specifically for relevance, the bar is super, super, super low. You get that in immediately just by saying, the bar is scintilla of evidence, and this supports our theory by X. Immediately done. All speculation is actually lack of foundation. So all you need to do to win a speculation objection is say, Your Honor, they have not laid the foundation for why this witness can actually make that statement. That's really it. On closings, I saw this in previous rounds, and this happened again. No one's really giving me an explanation of what the burden is other than more likely than not. Juries don't buy that. Juries straight up think, if it's not 70, 80%, why am I giving that guy $10 million? If I'm not more, all I have to be is 51% sure, they think that that's complete BS. So you guys need to come up with a way to explain the burden through some type of analogy, and maybe more creative than lighter than a feather or something that's not super repeated. I know I went through these, and if you have any questions, you can stick behind and ask or email me. I'm happy to give my email in chat if you guys want it, and you can follow up with me anytime. I want to say, I know I just nitpicked a whole bunch of negative things. Overall, you guys did a good job. So like, don't make it seem, I don't want to make it seem like you guys did just terrible at every single step of the way. These are nitpicks for you guys to improve once you get to regionals.
All right. I will go now. I do have a request. So I'm a teacher and I'm really used to like speaking into nothingness all day. So if possible, could y'all turn your cameras on? It would just help me. Thank you guys. Wonderful. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to give you guys some comments that are applicable just to take for your next round, because you can read my individual stuff. So I'm just going to try to give some general strategic things that hopefully you can use in the future. This was a really great round, especially for early in the year. So be proud of yourselves. I know all judges say that. So I will go break it down a little bit more. The first thing I need from, especially I think it was the defense in this case, is you have to dumb down the law for your jury. You guys recited case law. The jury should not hear case law. The jury should hear the elements that the plaintiff needs to prove or whatever, but you shouldn't be reciting case law and reading that case law. Just tell us what they need to prove and how they're not going to prove it. Make it as simplistic as possible. I would say speak like you're speaking to a middle schooler. Yeah. Second thing, I took points off for memorization. I'm a coach, so I know what it looks like when people are reading. Like I see my students do it and I yell at them. I get that it's weird in the Zoom format and you may think I don't notice, or you may think that like you're being slick with it, but you're not. Memorize. Why? Because it's not natural if you don't. I score basically based on how realistic your portrayal was for witnesses, and for attorneys, like how, same thing, how realistic you were, how conversational you were, and how you applied the law. So if it's not memorized, it's really hard for me to give you a great score, because I'm like, this isn't real. A real witness wouldn't be reading. On that note of realism, I find that even like when we write our directs and we have them memorized, there's in mock trial, there's like this disconnect where it's like we don't always act like people and say things that people would say, right? So what I would recommend that y'all do before your next round is just go look at your directs and think to yourself, would a human actually say these words? If they would not say those words, if it sounds goofy, and I get like characters are a little bit different, but if a human wouldn't speak like that, don't speak like that. Because I don't buy you if you're like just saying the super canned scripted answer. Another way to add realism is to take pauses before you speak. Don't just hop right on the answer. Think through. A human has to process a question before they respond. So you need to build in that time, process the question, and then respond to it. Big shout out to Dr. Kwan. I thought your performance was exceptional. I thought you were the most, I've seen a lot of this. You're one of the best Kwans I've seen. So fantastic job. I really thought that you nailed that realism that I was looking for in a witness. So congrats. And then obviously something actually defense I would like y'all to think about is I wasn't quite sure what your theory was, right? Like you have your theme, you have your theory. And I know for this case, it's really hard to come up with a defense theory. Believe me, my team has been through like 50 different defense theories, and we're just like, none of these are like actual theories. But I wasn't sure like if you were saying it was an accident. I wasn't sure if your theory was he just loved Casey so much that like he wouldn't do anything to hurt Casey. I just really wasn't sure. So in the future, come up and make sure I hear it in your opening, like, this is why they're wrong. Maybe you're attacking like the causation element. Well, actually you didn't call canon, so you couldn't be attacking causation, but maybe you're attacking like the intent element of it. Show me how. Consider maybe blaming it on someone else. Consider maybe saying there was an accidental contamination. That's up to y'all, but that just needs to be more clear. There was a very loud thud behind me. Sorry about that. It's probably my dog. And then finally, echoing the words of my co-judge, object. Please, for the love of God, object. It makes the round so much more interesting. Even if like you're not entirely like, well, I wouldn't say object if you're just like not sure, but get objections in there. There was mischaracter evidence, there was mishearsay, there was misspeculation, just across the board. Yeah. So anyway, good job, guys. I know that seemed critical, but I just hope that you're able to take some of that, apply it to the next round. And I wish y'all the best of luck. Can I ask what teams you guys are from?
Are we allowed to say that yet?
Yeah, Scott gave me a thumbs up.
Oh,
So
okay, cool. We're UMBC.
okay,
We're Liberty C.
awesome, great.
Well, if you guys have any questions, I think that your round starts at like 2. So if you can